In this video, we're going to take a look at text and how it works in CorelDraw. As I mentioned earlier, there are two types of text formulation in CorelDraw. One is artistic text, one is paragraph text. We'll take a look at both separately. So let's take a look at artistic text. One thing if you notice here right now, if I'm in just my basic pick tool selection here, you notice that my property bar is reflecting just basically the page size, the orientation, the landscape, or whether it's landscape or portrait, inches, my measurement, my duplication distance, but there's no text indication here on the property bar, which means that if I want to change a font size or anything like that, I can't do that right now because the property bar doesn't give me that ability. Once I do select the text though, now the property bar changes to show text functionality. And again, anything from this line here, right here, over is going to be a text function. So again, just remember that even though you may not see the text on the screen, once you select the text, this property bar will change, so it will give you some standard changes that you may want to make when you're actually setting up text. There's a couple of ways that we can start text in CorelDraw. The first is we can go over to our A icon that's listed in our toolbar, in a toolbox here, and we can just click on the A and then come out onto the desktop and then click here, and you'll notice you see a flashing cursor here. And basically that allows us to start typing. We can also, if we want, as you'll notice here, we can actually invoke the F8 key, and that will also start the text tool. So if I press F8, you'll notice that the text tool is activated because we can see the A underneath the crosshair. And if I click, text is ready to go. Now when we select text, you'll notice that with the artistic text, I can move the text wherever I want. Again, if I keep typing, the text will go off the page. There is no bounding box for artistic text until I press enter, and I've got another line. So again, the problem with artistic text sometimes is that if we're looking for text to stop at a page edge, it won't do that. And this is a problem with CorelDraw, and we'll talk about this later on. So again, if I want to start another line, I just press enter, and let's type in my name. And it's 2018. So once I'm done, I can just press the pick tool here, and this text can be moved wherever I want, and I can place it on the desktop. You notice here that the text tool also works just like an object. I've got my selection handles here on the side. I've got my middle selection handle designated with the crosshair plus right here. And all that information relates to the origin up here. So again, for example, let's put this on a 6x6 black. And if I select a text and I want it to go in the middle, then this needs to be 3x3. Again, you can also use the hotkey if you want, which is P, the letter P. And again, that puts the text in the middle of or the object in the middle of the page. So when working on text, there's a couple of things that you'll be familiar with if you're working with a word processor. If we want to edit text, the best way to do that is to move our cursor. Notice how right now it's just basically the pointer tool. What I want to have is I want to have it where I've got my my intersecting arrows here. When I have my intersecting arrows, I can double click on the text, and now I can select text same way as I can in a word processor. So let's say, for example, first thing we're going to talk about is if we want to change the character height. Now, if I want to change the character height of the whole of all the 3 lines, and they're all the same, I can do it a couple of ways. I can just click on this side here and I can drag out. That will basically change the height of the characters. If I want, I can also come up here. Right now you notice that the font size is 0.333 inches. If I want it to be half an inch, you'll notice that dynamically the text will change. And once I say 0.5, that changes all the text itself. So it's quite easy to make a fast change on the text in terms of size. If I want to just do individual lines, again, that's easy to do. Just I'm going to bring my cursor over, double click. I'm going to swipe to 2018, and let's assume that we want that to be smaller. And again, we get the dynamic text on the screen as we select the different numbers in our drop-down menu. Again, maybe we want to take this one here. Let's make this one, and again, we don't have to use these presets. You could type in your own number if you want. Come in here and type in, say, 0.45. And again, we'll leave this text here exactly the way it is. Now, the other thing that you may want to do is you may actually want to do an individual character, and that's quite, again, easy. Just drag select the C, and let's make that 0.6. And again, you notice that that character is bigger than the rest of the text. We can't do supersets and subscripts, but we'll talk about that later on. Again, if you want to do an individual character, just swipe 0.6, and you notice that I've only changed that one character, not all the rest of the characters. The other thing you may want to do is maybe change a font. And again, just like in CorelDraw, for changing the text height, I'm going to do it the same way with changing a font. Let's say I want to change the font for all 3 lines. Again, I can come into my font menu here, and again, I can move my cursor along on the text, and I get dynamically changing text as I select over top of the text in the drop-down menu. And again, you can pull down here, and again, if we want Century BT, you can click on that, and you notice that I've changed to a Century font. Now, if I want to do an individual line, not a big deal. I double-click on the text. I swipe that text. Let's make that that font, and then let's change my name to some other font. Let's grab something here. Let's say it's let's try this Freak Show here. So you can see that it's very easy to change fonts on any text that you want. Again, all you need to do is highlight that text. If I highlight the text as I've highlighted right now, it changes everything. If I want to do an individual highlight, then I need to double click and then swipe that text. And again, if I want to change just the individual character, not a big deal. There we go. If I want to change that T to a totally different font, not a big deal. Let's go grab that. And you notice that I've just changed the actual character and not the rest of the 3 characters and the rest of the word. So again, that's a quick way of just being able to change our font height and the actual font itself. Now again, depending on which font we're working with, there are some other abilities for our text to be able to do, which is, again, if I double click on the 18 here, you notice here that I can underline this text. Now I can't actually italicize or bold this text, and the reason being is that this text doesn't support that function. So again, if you want to work with that type of function, then you need to make sure that the font that you're working with has that ability. So let's go back up and let's just grab an Arial font. If If I select that text now, if I change that font to Arial, you'll notice now that I have the ability to bold, italicize, and underline, which I could have done before. Again, it's always important to remember, if you want that functionality, that you choose a font that supports bolding and italicizing. If I select this font here, again, you'll notice that this font only supports underlining. So again, if I want boldness in the font, we may need to pick something else. And you'll notice sometimes that fonts have the ability to maybe one may be able to see, here's one normal italics, here's one that's normal. And again, if I select that, I do have the ability with that one to italicize where I didn't have it on the other font. So again, it's always important when you're working with a font, if you do want the ability to bold and italicize, that you pick a font that supports both of those functions. The other thing you might want to do with the font is work with the justification. As I mentioned in my setting up of Corel defaults, I always like my default text to be center justified. Typically, most of the time when you're working with text, with the laser machine in particular, you're normally working in center justification. But if I click this little icon right here, little flyout menu here, you notice that I've got basically 6 ways to work. A couple of them, again, none means that there is no justification and text will just go to the right. Left is a left justification. Center is what we were working with, and you notice that it dynamically changes as I work to the next type of justification. Fully justified would be if I had an actual window there. Typically, I'll use this more often in paragraph text as opposed to artistic text. But again, if we want to justify, we can do that. Sometimes this is we'll use justification if we're doing, say, a coach's plaque. We've got 3 columns, and the left column is left justified. The center column is center justified, and the right column is right justified. So again, quite easy to change the justification. Just a couple of things to notice on the toolbar, on the property bar for text, is that the bulleted list and our drop cap doesn't work when we're actually working in artistic text. These only work for paragraph text, so again, that's why these are grayed out right now. The edit text properties, again, is something we'll talk about in a little bit. But if I click on that, that gives me an actual Docker on the right here, and there's lots of functionality in seeing the text on the right-hand side here. We'll get into that in a little while because this can be quite useful to be using this. The edit text function is good because I can click on that. That allows me, if I want, to make my changes in an actual sort of text window. Sometimes I'll use this because sometimes it's easier than coming over here, double-clicking on the text and then swiping everything. Again, sometimes it's easier just to go to the edit text function, and that allows me to go into a window, and now I can make my actual text here. Sometimes I'll work from here as opposed to working right on the actual screen. We'll talk about the edit text function again in a little further episode. And again here, the open text or the interactive open type, again, is something that I'm not going to talk about. It's not something typically that we see. So we'll leave that one alone here. You can add some other buttons if you want. If you want to add some commands that maybe you use all the time in text, and you want to bring them out so you can actually see them on the screen here. If you want, just as a side note, if you right-click on this property bar here, you can go and click on text. And what that will do is that will bring up a text Docker here, and allows me to actually have this floating in front of me if I want. Again, I can move this wherever I want. What I can also do is I can actually put this right in the actual property bar itself. So if you notice here, when I don't have text selected, I still have the text property bar active up top here. And again, this can be a little bit confusing because now if I select text, now I kind of have 2 property bars side by side. But again, some people like this because they always have the text and it's always working for them. And again, if they want, they can actually, bring that out and have it floating around if they want. So again, that's a bit of a side note. If you really want to see the text all the time, then you can activate the text, an extra text box here, and that will always be working for you. So again, just right click in the property bar here and go to text, and you notice now that it's actually right inside the property bar or inside the menu bar, and I can see this, and it'll be active when I don't have the text selected. Again, if you want to unlock the toolbar and bring it back out to float, then all we need to do is right click on our property bar here, click the lock toolbar, so now everything's unlocked, and that gives me the ability now, if I come over this little shaded area here, you notice that my cursor changes to the four-sided arrows, and I can click on here, hold my left mouse button down, and then drag back out. And again, this text is floating, this text bar is floating around. Again, this can be quite handy if you're working with text on a regular basis, and you don't want to be, sliding up to the property bar to make changes. You can have this sort of close to your text that you're working with. If I click on the X here, that basically gets rid of that toolbar, and again, now it's gone. If I want to bring it back, I just right click and click on text, and off you go. There are some text functions that we can find in our drop-down menu called text at the top here. If I select the text, you'll notice that the text property command is listed right here, which is the one that opened up the Docker for me. The hotkey is Control-T. So again, I can select the text property bar by clicking on that. I can hold the Control key, Control and the T down, and that basically will turn off the actual Docker. If I press the Control key again and press the letter T, then it comes back. So again, hotkeys are quite nice. If you're using this on a regular basis, then certainly a hotkey that you'll want to remember. You notice that tabs, columns, bullets, drop caps, these are functions that are found in paragraph text, but they're not found in our artistic text. Font playground, we'll talk about that later on. Here's our edit text command. A hotkey for that is Control-Shift-T. Again, that was the one that was up in the toolbar here. Again, if I select that, you notice that the box comes back up. So again, if you want to work with this on a fairly regular basis, which I do, I use the Control-Shift-T, and you notice that it's a hotkey that turns that function on for you. Insert character, we'll come back to that. We'll talk about that. Formatting codes, I'm not really worrying about that. We can convert our text to paragraph text if you want. Haven't really used that too much. Straighten text, again, haven't used that too much. And writing tools are spell check, grammar, thesis, quick correct. Again, these are things that you may want to use if you want to spell check a document. Not a big deal when you've only got a few words on the screen, but if you're working in paragraph text and you've got a fairly lengthy dissertation on the screen, then sometimes it's good to be able to have the spell check option to be able to go through and check the text. Change case, exactly what that is. That basically allows us to do sentence case, lowercase, uppercase, title case, or toggle case. Again, use these periodically sometimes. And again, they reflect whatever's selected on the screen. So if I go to uppercase, you'll notice everything changes. If I double click and I only go to that text and it's selected, and I go to change case, again, the hotkey is Shift F3, I can change this to sentence case, and that only changes whatever I've selected. So again, the selection functionality works the same way we talked about earlier. Whatever's selected, whether it's all the artistic text or whether it's just pieces of the artistic text, are going to change to whatever's been selected and whatever we've told the text to do. Text down here, encode what the font, we'll talk about that later on. Text statistics, again, I don't use this that much anymore. I do have some people that still like to charge by character. This is a quick way of being able to figure out how many characters are in a job, and if you are sort of, keeping track of, how much engraving is being done in terms of text, or you are charging by characters, then this can actually work good for you. Again, you've got to be careful because if I remember correctly, this is going to include spaces. So you may want to just sort of do a bit of an average in terms of just making sure that you're not overcharging or undercharging for what you're doing if you're working this way. You notice when we select text, we actually have these nodes that will appear below each one of these below our text and artistic. These are control nodes, and they allow us to make changes to the actual individual font using the shape tool. And again, this sometimes we'll use the shape tool to make some quick changes, and there's some pretty neat things that we can do with the shape tool. So the hotkey for the shape tool is basically F10. I can select it on the toolbox up here at the top, and once I click the shape tool, you notice I get a couple of little tools that appear here, one pointing down, one pointing to the right. Again, if I pull to the right, that basically does the inner character spacing between our text. And that allows me, so again, if you're looking to quickly stretch your text out without distorting it, you can use this functionality here to increase the spacing of the text. And again, I've used this very, a lot. And it's a very handy tool to have. If I select this tool here and I drag down, that basically changes the inner line spacing. And again, is a quick way if you want to spread your text out. Again, notice that right now it's selecting everything. And I'm moving. So again, even though I select the bottom nodes, this really only controls still the actual lines in the actual text box. If I hold the Shift key down and I pull, this actually increases just the space between the words. So this is kind of your inner word spacing. This is holding the Shift key down. Okay, so again, this was doing all the text, and if I hold the Shift key down, this basically just does the inner word spacing. Again, sort of depending on what you want to do in terms of how you want to change your text, you can use these tools here to quickly make some quick changes. Again, I use this on a pretty regular basis. You can also, if you want, if I do select a node here, you notice I get some things that will appear up on the toolbar, still working in text, but I've got some different tools here that I didn't have before. Again, I have the ability, if I want to change just this font, I can change in terms of the font height, I can change the actual font itself. If I want, I can come in, I can italicize only that text, that character. I can underline only that character. With the node selected, I can actually increase or decrease the horizontal offset of the actual selected character. So if I increase the horizontal offset, I actually get closer to the actual next character. If I decrease, I get farther away. This is my vertical character offset, which basically means I move up or I move down. And again, this is my angle. So again, if I want to turn the character by a certain degree, I can do that here. You'll also notice that if I want, I can actually click and hold this, and I can actually move the character myself. If I hold the Control key down, it constrains it to the baseline of the actual line of the text. You notice that if I'm moving left to right, my horizontal offset is changing in the property bar. If I go up, you notice that the vertical is changing. You can select more than one of these characters and then move a group of them. So I can move this back and forth, up or down. I can select all these and move them over. Sometimes when you have characters such as, say, Walter, which is a fairly standard type of word that we used to use when we would be explaining the kerning of a character, you'll notice that the W and the A here are fairly close together. And again, we have the ability, if you want, to just select the W here and then move away. And if you want more space here, if you want, you can move the A away from the L by selecting these two here, and then that allows us to move that away from the L. And then again, if you want, maybe we want the T to be moved, the L away, the W and the A away from the T. Again, we can move that. So again, the ability to manipulate the individual characters gives us a lot more control over the way our characters are displayed on the screen. And again, the kerning pairs, the kerning spacing here is different with each font. So again, it isn't standard with all fonts. So again, we may need to space this out more with a Arial font than we would with a Times Roman font. So it's always good to have this control. The last two buttons here allow us just to change the case of the characters. So again, right now I've got everything basically first character sentence case. And again, if I want, I can go to all caps. Or if I want, I can go back to the way it was and click here. We also have the edit text box that we talked about earlier. Again, sometimes I like to edit text from within this box as opposed to doing it right on the actual page. To access this, all we have to do is go Control-Shift-T, or we can actually access it from the toolbar here if we want to do that. You can see the text listed right here. Again, we have our standard ways of, as we had before, we can select our text here, and we can change the font. We can go to different character heights. We can make it bold, italicize it, underline it, change the justification. Again, we have, for the old people, we do have the character returns here if you want. We do have some options where we can select everything. We can change the case. So again, if I want that all uppercase, I can do that. We can replace text, I can find some text in here, replace text. So it's more kind of like a small word processor inside CorelDraw. It's certainly been here for a long time, and again, I've used it periodically when I've been working with a fair bit of text that I want to bring into Corel. We've got a spell check, we've got thesaurus, grammar check. The text options will take us into the actual defaults for some text. So again, if you're looking to change something in the spelling or the fonts or whatever, then you can do that right here if you want. You have your import text. Again, if you want, if we got delete rid of this and we decided we want to import some text, you can go grab a RTF file, which text format, or just a standard TXT file, and I can double click on that. I have the standard importing, pasting text window that comes up, and I can import the text in basically as tables or as text. In this case, it's just text. So I'm going to say OK, and you notice the text just slides in. Once I've got the text, I can say OK, and the text comes in. And notice, because this is artistic text, there's no carriage returns there, which this basically means that the text becomes one long line on the actual page. So again, this is one problem against artistic versus paragraph text. And we'll talk about paragraph text once we've done the artistic text. So again, not a bad way of bringing text in, but sometimes if you're looking for the carriage returns, then you may want to use the paragraph text. Again, if we come back in again, let's get rid of this, delete, Control V, which is bringing that text back in again. If you want, actually, let's come in here, select all, delete, let's import it back in again. And again, we can use the following separators. Now, there's no separators in this, but we can, if we had a comma there, then it would basically use a separator and could give us a carriage return. So again, there is no carriage return here. The only carriage return is at the end of this line right here. If you want, we could come up here. Next thing to talk about is the text properties Docker. And again, that's available just through the text, through Control-T. You can also find it under Dockers and under the text properties, under text properties. Again, here we can change if we select the A tool here, that gives us all basically font attributes. So again, you can see we've got all our fonts that if we want to use those. We can come in here, we've got normal italics for that physical font. We've got the font size here if we want to adjust that. Again, we could put in 25, and that's really big. We can go back down to 0.5, and again we come back down. You'll notice that it's changed everything because I've gone 0.5 for everything selected. I can change the fills too here if I want. I can use, say I want to use a red fill instead of a black fill. I can do that here. I can use a text background if I want, which basically, if we go to a uniform fill, saying we have our background around the text. Again, I typically don't use this, but again, it has the ability here to do that. And again, we can put a hairline width here if we want. So again, sometimes people may want to actually put a little line around here to make it easier to read. You might be using this for sublimation. You could make this, you could switch this around and we can make the text black. And then we can make the hairline red. No, 255. And we can actually, if we wanted to, we can engrave the text and then we can do a cutout after. Or, there's some times maybe where you might want to make this 00, and maybe you want this to be a bit wider because maybe you want the font to appear bolder. And again, this is certainly something you can do here. You can change the to all caps here if you want. You got tilting caps, we got small caps, so there's a bit of more ability to make some changes here. I've got, we got the superstrip command. If you want, you can make that change right here. Again, we've got some number styles in here which basically aren't active for this font. And again, if we're done looking at the characters, we can actually bring that out of the way by clicking this arrow right here. That brings basically the character attributes up. If I click the paragraph, then all I display is the paragraph information. Again, you've got some things here such as, no justification, left justification, center, right. So these are active right here. And again, none, go back to center. We do have the ability to change the line spacing, which increases the line spacing. I have the ability to change my inner character spacing here. And this is our word spacing. So again, I was accessing those earlier with the shape tool and then using the arrow keys that are here. Again, I got some language spacing here. I'm really not doing any off language, but again, if you're working with other foreign languages, then sometimes the language spacing helps control some of the spacing between the multilingual text. So again, that's something that we can access here. The frame, we're not really working with frames here in artistic text, so that's more for paragraph text. And then this is our ability to see only the individual one that we've got selected here. And again, you notice here that I've got some strikeouts here. If I want to put those in, again, I don't really know too many times we might be using something like this, but we do have the character offsets that we had earlier. And again, that's banded just by selecting one character, and then we can basically then increase this or decrease this. It's a little bit different working with this command in the text properties, because the only way I could access that before was to use the shape tool and then select a node up from the actual letter and then move it that way. Here you can actually just select the characters you want to work with, and then you can actually increase or decrease the values that you want here. Again, clicking this activates everything, and then basically this is your style indicators. And again, style indicators, we'll talk about style indicating later on. So Well, that's it for working with the artistic text. Let's take a look at working with paragraph text. The second type of text that you can find in CorelDraw is what we refer to as paragraph text. Paragraph text is designed to handle larger blocks of text. Artistic text is more designed to handle smaller blocks of text, where paragraph text is designed to handle larger blocks of text. Typically, I used to do a newsletter in CorelDraw, and if I used artistic text on the newsletter, I ended up running out of memory. Certainly, it's a little bit more taxing on the system than paragraph text is, but nowadays, with the way the computers are, it's not such a big deal like it used to be in the old days. Paragraph text typically is more like a word processing program. So there's certain functionality that I need with paragraph text that I can't get with artistic text. Things like doing column layouts. Maybe you might want to go from one frame of text to another frame of text, and you want to have text flow there. Again, if you want to sort of maybe flow around a photograph or an image or something like that, then certainly paragraph text is better handled for that. If you want to use bullets, gutters, things like that, paragraph text is better suited for this. I typically don't see paragraph text as really something that's really very useful for most applications in the laser machine. Again, somebody's giving you a job and they're going to give you a large chunk of text, and you've got to engrave that text, on a, maybe it's a wayfaring sign, or maybe it's a, maybe it's a, a sign, where you've got a picture of something and you've got this large explanation or history behind the actual photograph. Then, paragraph text is kind of nice for something like that. Again, you can force justify to the edges, might look a little bit more like a newspaper layout. And again, maybe that fits for you. I really can't see too many times where artistic text is not as good as paragraph text. And again, I typically, maybe a coach's plaque or something I've used for paragraph text too, but really ultimately, most of the time I'm using artistic text over paragraph text. But let's take a look at paragraph text and let's see how it can help you out. When you want to invoke paragraph text, it's basically the same process as we would be using to invoke artistic text. We're going to go over to the A tool, or we could press the F8 key down, and instead of clicking on your desktop, what you want to do is click and hold the left mouse button down and drag out a window box like this. Again, it doesn't really matter what size it is, we just need something to get started out with. You'll notice that I've got a cursor flashing up in the top left-hand corner here. I'm going to make my text a little bit bigger here, just so you can see what happens if I start typing on the screen here. You'll notice as I get to the edge of the frame, the text wraps. This is very important to remember about the wrapping function, because you can see that if you're dumping a large amount of text in here, you remember my previous work with the artistic text. If you dumped a large chunk of text in there, the text just kept on rolling right off the page. Well, here it actually flows inside the frame that you create. Therefore, when we're working with large amounts of text and we're bringing it in, sometimes paragraph text is a lot better to use. I tend to find I don't have as much control over the text, so again, I like artistic text, but again, as I mentioned before, there's sometimes where our paragraph text is needed. So again, we can keep on typing, and our text basically will flow into that area. You can see as I go. So again, you can see here, I've got a fair bit of space going on here, because this word here won't fit on this line, so it wraps down to the next line. Again, if I type in some text and keep going, you'll notice that I get an arrow right here. That indicates that I've got more text underneath here. Once you click with the left mouse button, and I can drag down, and you'll notice the text will show up. Again, we can resize the frame, and as we resize the frame, the text will flow around the actual text that we've got here around the frame. Again, this text is formatted at the top here through the property bar here. And again, we have the ability to, indent, work with tabs, things like that. And again, more like a word processing program for doing the text. You'll also notice in my object manager, my paragraph text actually has almost like a free frame window here attached to the actual text itself, which indicates that we've got paragraph text. It also suggests paragraph text. If I'm working with artistic text, then that's going to be signified by the A right here. So you've got your two different types of text. So if you're looking for a visual layout, you can see them in the object manager. Naturally, you can see on the screen here that the frame text has the dotted line going around the outside, and we've got text, our artistic text is right here. So if we start up paragraph text here, drag a box in. If I select the box just with a pick tool, you notice that basically Corel's giving us a message indicating that this is a paragraph text frame, and we can add text in by clicking here with the text tool and being able to add some text. Now again, if you want, you can just double click and you can just start typing here. Again, if I put in some text, I'll just go Control V, and here's some text here. Now again, a couple things that we can do like we can do with the others. You notice when we go into text mode, we have the text property bar. It becomes active here. So if we want, we can select what we want in terms of text, and then we can change the font. We can change the text size. If the font supports boldness, I can bold this, I can italicize it, I can underline it. I can, if I want, force, I can go left justify, center, right, full justify, which basically means that it's trying to fill in the space, which is more like what you'd probably see in a newspaper. Or I can force justify, which basically takes the last line and forces it so that it goes right to the edge of the actual border of the frame. Again, whichever one you choose is fine. Again, if you've got 3 frames here, you might have the first one is left, the second one is center, and the third one is right, which you might see sometimes in a coach's plaque. You've got a line and column of names, in all three of the columns. So your first column is going to be left justified. The next one's going to be center, and the one on the right is going to be right justified. I do have the ability, if I want, I can bullet the list. Or if I had a drop cap, I could put in here if I want. Or if I want, I can go to text properties, edit text, also if I want to. We can access some of the functions for the paragraph text like we can with artistic text from the pull down menu. So go up to text, and you notice here our first section is tab. Again, tabs are if we're used to laying text out in a word processing program and you want to use tabs as your alignment, then we can do that here. It's quite easy to do in CorelDraw if you want. The second one is columns. Again, I use this a little bit when it comes to paragraph text. Again, let's assume we want 2 columns. You notice that I automatically now have 2 columns flowing inside this text frame here. We'll make that an equal column, and then I can say OK. Now if you double click on the text here, you'll notice that I've got what we call the gutter right here. The gutter, again, I can make it wider, or I can make it smaller depending on how I want the text to flow here. So again, if I make this smaller, you notice how the text flows along the gutter, along the 2 frames, and the gutter's there to give us the spacing between the 2 columns. We can also come in here, we can bullet the list from here. You can do a drop cap. I can edit the text if I want. Same way I could do this with artistic text. I can convert my text to artistic text. You notice down the bottom here, my text has gone from paragraph text to artistic text. Again, I can fit the text to the frame if I want. And again, I'll show you a technique where that comes in handy in another setup, in another example. Sometimes when you're working with an irregular shaped object, you may want to place a text inside that irregular shaped object. Typically, most people just think that paragraph text has to go in the rectangle frame, but you can use any shape to create a frame it, and that's quite easy to do. Let's assume that we're going to make let's make a heart. That's probably an easy one to do. So here's a heart. If we go over to the text tool and I bring my cursor over, watch what happens. When I get inside the frame here, you notice how the text becomes dotted. What that allows me to do now is to click inside here, and CorelDraw will actually create a text frame around the frame of my heart. So now what I can do is I can actually start typing if I wanted to put my own text in. Or what you could do is we could paste in the text I was using before. So Control V, say OK, and you notice how the text basically flows with inside the actual frame of the heart. Now again, this is quite nice because we could do some different experimentation on here just to see if different size characters will work. We can come in here under text, actually under alignment here if we want. We can force justify, which will push everything over to the corners. Again, you can see how that full justify brings it like this. The force justify brings it over to the corners, so it fills all the way in. Again, what you could also do is you could come into the text frame as we did here and say fit text to frame. And again, that will try to fit everything in here. In this case, it doesn't fit everything in here. But again, if we come down here and we do a force justification, you'll notice that it pretty well fills everything in, aside from a little bit of space down here because we have run out of text. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Let's go to 0.275. And you notice here now that I've actually filled up the whole heart now with text. One of the things that we can do with paragraph text is we can actually link two text frames together. This is quite easy to do. Just select our text tool, draw a frame. I'm going to duplicate the frame just by going right-clicking. I've got two frames. Now, in the first frame, I'm going to put in some text. And if I click inside this box right here, this bottom box here, you can notice that I get my cursor changes to a frame with an arrow on it. And basically what this allows me to do is to move over to this frame here, and you notice how it changes into an arrow. Okay? By clicking inside this frame, I now have a link between these two frames. And you notice that the extra text that was not being displayed in the text on the left is now showing up in the second box here. I've got an actual arrow here that indicates that the flow is going this way. Okay, if I select this text here and I decrease the amount of space, you notice how the text flows over to this other frame on the right here. If I undo this, again I can click here and then click over to this, and now my flow is going from right to left. And if I double click in here and I go Control V, you'll notice that my flow now is going right to left. And if I increase my frame size, I lose all the text. If I decrease the frame size, the text will flow over to the other frame. Another way that you can create a frame is we can take the frame here. Let's undo this first. And let's get rid of this. Again, you can double click inside this frame right here, and that allows me to drag a box, which now allows me to create a second frame, and I automatically have that link between these. So again, let's double click in here, Control V, paste in the text, and notice how the text goes over to the second frame that I clicked on. So again, being able to link frames is quite nice if we want to maybe take a text frame from one area to another. And again, if I decide to increase the font size, you notice that everything will flow over to this side here to fill in for the area that's where we don't have enough room here. It flows over to here. So linking text frames together is quite good. And again, you can, at the end, you can actually, let's come in here. Let's make all this text the same size. Just 0.25. And now if I say, for example, I want my text to be this big, then again, I can have my linking text down here. Again, as we did before, we can place our text on the screen here in paragraph text. Let's paste in some text. And if we go Control T, we get our text properties box up. And again, you notice here that we have all basically the ability here to make our changes for our justification. If we want, we can select everything here. I can change the font. I can change go to normal italic if I want. I can change the font size. I can underline. Again, if I want to change the color, I can. Again, I can change to caps if I want, all caps, small caps, or none. Again, I've got my position if I want. And again, typically I want to do that. And again, if I want, I do have the ability to do some strike throughs here. And if I want, I can put some double lines, double strike throughs on here. I have the ability to do some horizontal movements if I want. And again, you notice that the text gets pushed over to the right. If I go into a minus, it goes to the left. I do have the ability here to also indent right here. So I can indent, I could say 0.5. And again, that will indent my second line and beyond that from the first line. I can do a first line indent. Maybe that's 0.25. So again, you have a lot of functionality that you would normally have within a word processing program. Again, if I come down here, I've got my inner character spacing, which we could say is 25. And then my word spacing might be 150. And maybe my inner line spacing might be 50. So the text property box gives us lots of access to a number of tools within one Docker. So again, we don't have to go up to the text pull down menu or the text property bar. Everything is accessible through the text property bar. Whichever way you want to manipulate your text with the tools that are available, you can do it in a couple of different ways in CorelDraw, the same as you can for any tool that you can find in Corel. Well, that's it for paragraph text. Let's look at working with insert special characters. One tool that I use a lot that a lot of people don't know about is the insert character. This is found under text, insert character. Hotkey is Control F11. When you activate the insert character, you'll notice that you get another Docker that shows up on the right side of your workspace. Again, we can come in here. These are all the special characters that are inside the font that is selected right now. So you notice that I've got a half symbol, a 1/3 symbol, I've got an @ I've got my standard characters, but I've got a registration mark, Again, lots of different symbols here. I've got my European symbols right here for all the different languages. And again, quite easy for us to use these. Again, if we want to use the registered trademark symbol, I can just hold the left mouse button down and dragging out. You notice that there's a plus symbol underneath the pick tool. Let go, and I've got myself a registered trademark. And again, if I want, I can actually, I could say this is Trotec. And if I want to register Trotec, and I can take this and then just move it down, size it as I need it, and I've got myself a registered trademark. So again, quick way sometimes of finding some hidden gems that are inside the actual characters embedded with the font. Again, let's say you wanted to make this, a French accent on the E here. So again, if we go into our mode and I back off this E here, and I want to insert a lowercase e, then you'll notice that all I need to do is to double click, and in comes the actual character inside the font. So very handy when you're working with some foreign type fonts, maybe where you don't have access to these fonts easily from the keyboard. Again, these do have a lot of these symbols have an actual ASCII number where you hold the Alt key down, and on your number pad you'll type in 0126 or whatever. But sometimes it's easier to just work it this way. So again, this is quite advantageous when we're working with some foreign type fonts. What you can also do with the, if we go into, say, let's go into a Wingding font, which is down here. Let's try Webdings. You notice inside Webdings, I've got a whole bunch of different symbols. So again, sometimes you might be able to find a half-decent symbol here that you can use for your job. And again, I'm holding left mouse button down. I can drag out, let go, and here's the symbol from the actual font. Again, if I want, I can double click in here, double click on this, and notice how the symbol goes right inside the actual text. As long as I'm in text mode and my cursor is flashing, I can come in here and I can double click on, say, the world here, the globe, and that symbol comes into the line of text that I'm working with. So again, very, very popular way of being able to put in some weird characters. Again, sometimes I can find symbols in here that maybe you're looking for on the web. Maybe somebody's looking for maybe like as a registered trademark symbol. Here's an identifier. Again, you might CorelDraw comes with some sports symbols. Again, you can load these in if you want. And again, if you're looking for a soccer player or soccer ball or something, those are inside the actual font itself. So again, it's certainly a very neat little program side program that you can work with that will help you find some pretty neat things. Again, under the symbol library, you can see that I've got some, here's the Apple logo here, here's a trademark symbol that you can work with right here. So again, definitely sort of a Docker that I like to fool around with, and sometimes it can get me out of a jam, especially when I'm looking for some sort of a different symbol, or in the case right here, I'm looking for a font for a foreign language that typically maybe a customer wants to work with. For example, I'm in Canada. A lot of times we may be doing stuff in English, or we could be doing stuff in French. So it's quite easy for us if a customer is looking for some French text, for us to put in the accented type characters into the actual lines of text that we're creating.